Welcome to GloryBee Straight from the Hive channel. I'm Alan Turanski, president of GloryBee, and I'm excited to welcome our first guest. Yes, this is our first Hive channel podcast, videocast with Julie Willoughby, my definitely longtime friend and GloryBee's quality assurance manager and honey aficionado, passionate about honey. Julie started with GloryBee a long time ago, and she's been here forever. She's part of the Hive, and she's got some great stories and insights. And we're just going to riff on honey and GloryBee and everything that's going on in the wild world of bees and honey. So, Julie, glad that you could join me today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I mean, we're going to talk about some maybe industry stuff, some GloryBee stuff, but I want to start off with just um, when were you introduced to bees and honey? I want to know a little bit about that part of your story.
Yeah. When I first moved up to Eugene, Oregon, was looking for a career opportunity, working for Oak Harbor Freight Lines, and we were moving a lot of freight for GloryBee, and I got curious and wanted to know what GloryBee was about, and there was an opportunity to come on board, and I've been stuck ever since.
Well, there used to be a T-shirt when my parents started the business a long time ago that said, "Honey lovers stick together." So you certainly stuck with it, and it's awesome. Okay, so um, there's this saying, "bee's knees," and it really means the best. So, what's the best honey you've ever had, ever?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. You know me. I love honey, and I love all the different varieties, and I love when they're polyfloral, and it's a different variety of different floral sources. But I do have to say, of all the amazing honeys that we've had, um, and yes, buckwheat is up there on the top. I know that sounds weird to a lot of people who know buckwheat. It has a strong aroma of hay or barnyard, as a lot of people like to say. But honestly, for me, my favorite bee's knees or best honey that I've had is the fireweed. It's
Oh,
that really sweet, mild, but with a spicy note at the end. And I just love how the fireweed grows up after a fire. And, being from Western Oregon, we know we have our run of that. And I love this beautiful purple flower coming up out of the ground after, it's been burnt and charred, and this sweet spicy honey that comes from it. And it's just a beautiful honey. And I think it's a beautiful thing that, after this, kind of destruction comes this beautiful fireweed. So
yeah,
that's my
no.
favorite.
Well, it's a beautiful flower too, and man, harvesting the fireweed honey, I have just heard, beekeepers. I mean, they got to put up bare fences and deal with destruction of fences and hives, and it's not easy to get fireweed honey in the sense of you got to drive up into the mountains, you got to put up these bare fences and take care of the bees. So it's definitely a
It
precious honey when you get fireweed honey for
for
sure.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about the sort of the opposite of this idea of like, this fireweed honey, it's pristine, it's up in the mountains, and then there's food fraud. And in the honey industry, what, all your years of experience, how do you just describe to the person on the street, like, why does, in what ways does food fraud happen to honey, and why does it happen? And tell us a little bit about how you would just kind of share that with the general public.
Yeah, it's interesting. GloryBee's been battling this since before it became a requirement with the FDA, this term food fraud became kind of this niche thing. The bees make the honey, right? So we're relying on the bees around the world to make this sweet, viscous, amazing product for us. And the quantity is dependent on the bees, and unfortunately, the bees aren't producing, enough for to meet the demands across the world. There are unfortunate people who will try to extend their volumes and increase their volumes by adding other sugar syrups to the honey. And honey has a price that it's not the cheapest sweetener out there, but it's definitely one of the most beneficial. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that again, just because you can't really control how much is produced because it's produced by the bees, there is this opportunity for food fraud, and we've seen it, and we've been testing for it and finding it, like I said, well before it was required by certifying bodies or by regulatory agencies. And it's funny, when I first came into GloryBee many years ago, that was one of it's always been just a source of pride for me, because this family business that was started in a garage, and just the care that Dick and you, Alan, both being beekeepers, and just the care that you guys take with beekeeping and with the beekeepers in our region, and then just ensuring that we're not degrading that honey or adulterating it anyway. And so I think that's ultimately why this food fraud, and why it's such a high risk when
Yeah,
when you think about food fraud.
totally. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's very helpful. For me, being a beekeeper, you see how amazing the bees are, and really you start to understand how hard they work. You know, in their lifetime, they don't even produce a teaspoon of honey, and they're literally wearing their wings out, and because they're flying so many miles during their lifetime that they wear their wings out. So when you when you're a beekeeper, you certainly appreciate what they're doing and how they're doing it, and so it's a sense of pride for us, as you said. Let's talk a little bit about first maybe how we ensure the quality of the honey, and I know that extends from just supplier relationships to what we test it for and all those kind of things. But talk us through a little bit of the steps that we take, and then we'll have a follow-up question. We talk a little bit more about our certifications and stuff, but just talk us through the fundamentals of how do we ensure that quality, make sure that this amazing product that is made by nature, made in nature by the bees, is sort of defended and protected in an authentic way. So
Sure, yeah. Before we even start testing the honey, it's so important to have good relationships and partnerships. And again, that's just another, quality that GloryBee has always maintained. And relationships, genuine relationships specifically, have always been very important. And another reason why we stick around, right? And just knowing where we're getting our honey from is so important, and understanding what their beekeeping practices are, what their extraction processes are, understanding their GMPs, doing some training, especially if they're domestic beekeepers. A lot of these, domestic beekeepers are just pollinators, right? So they're not really aware of GMPs and FSMA, and all of these strict requirements. But we want to support all of those partners. And so, I think that it starts with that relationship, that partnership with our suppliers. And then, of course, the testing comes into play, and the testing continues to get better and better every year, which isn't always great for some partners out there who unfortunately, if there's feeding practices, if they're feeding after, like, maybe pollinating the almond crop, they might do some feeding before they go to the citrus crop, and unfortunately that can impact the quality of the honey that they're extracting. And they're not always aware of that. So again, making sure that they have really good beekeeping practices and extracting practices to ensure that none of that stuff is getting, the honey's not getting adulterated, and there's no cross-contamination during the extraction process.
Mhm.
But specifically the testing that we do, we're looking at, of course, adulteration, We do several different types of adulteration testing. Um, we're looking for antibiotics. We'll do annual pesticide testing. Um, and then we're just also looking at the flavor and the color, the moisture. If you
Mm-hmm.
extract too early, the honey isn't, it hasn't full, the bees will actually do a lot of the evaporation process um, for us packers. So thank you, bees, again. And so, making sure that moisture is around the 18% mark is really important for shelf life and for the quality of the honey, so you don't have any fermentation there. And we do some additional testing for microbiological. Honey is an amazing product. It's actually antimicrobial, so it's not necessary to do the testing, but we do it just to ensure that nothing's being introduced during the extraction process or the processing. And so, yeah, we do above and beyond testing that's required by regulatory agencies, by certifiers, because as we were talking about earlier, every drop of honey, those bees work so hard, and we just want to make sure that what we're putting out into the market and for our customers is truly the best quality that we can give. And we know those bees worked so hard for it, so we just want to continue it throughout the whole chain there.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make sure that we're providing what nature provides, right?
Yeah.
The purity that nature provides. So I love that. I think you took a trip with Dick Turanski, the founder, my dad, and visited some suppliers. Can you just, any kind of quick highlights from that trip?
Yeah, that was a great trip. We went to Thailand and Vietnam. There's two things that stand out for me. The first one was Thailand. We went to southern Thailand, and there was a region that had been kind of decimated by the tsunami that had happened.
Mm,
And the Thai government had really wanted to bring the agricultural back to that region. And so they started training a lot of beekeepers, and so there was a lot of beekeepers and beekeeping training that was happening there. And so to see that area come back to life and have bees be such a big part of that, and to be able to source that honey, and that was actually the first conventional honey that we were able to get non-GMO project verified, because it was essentially this kind of wild jungle honey that was coming back after the tsunami. So it was a great story. It was a great experience to see it in person. Um, but I would say the highlight of the trip was when we went to Vietnam. We flew to this area that was coffee plantations, and
uh-huh.
we took this little puddle jumper, this little tiny plane. I remember just getting onto the plane and thinking, oh gosh, I hope we get there. But we got off the plane as soon as they opened the door, and we stepped out onto the stairs, and just this aroma hit us, and we just kept looking around and looking at each other and asking everybody, what's that smell? What is that smell? It was just the most fragrant, beautiful floral smell, and all of the coffee plantations in that area were in bloom, and the bees were going at it, and I really connected with the bees at that moment, because it was like, I want to go to those flowers and pull that nectar out. It just and we got to the plantation, and we walked through the rows of the trees and the plants, and we just almost grabbed the flowers as we walked through, and just rubbed them on our hands, and just that smell was just beautiful. And that's really what we got when we tasted the honey right out of the hive. It was just beautiful.
Oh man, I love that story. That is fantastic. I
Yeah,
want to go there. That's what
you
I want to
need to
do.
go. You need to go. It's absolutely gorgeous.
That's awesome. So GloryBee, we hold a number of certifications across the company, and some of those are B Corp, and some are quality related. And so we tell us a little bit about. We have a couple certifications that we hold, and so first, let's just talk about SQF. What does that mean? Why do we hold that certification? And then I've got another one I'll ask you about. So.
Yeah, SQF, Safe Quality Foods. So we don't just do honey. but you know, regardless if it was just honey or 1,000 other products, we always want to be producing safe, quality food, right? And it's a standard that you know it's GFSI recognized, and it just holds us to a higher standard of ensuring that we have the right systems in place. We have best practices in place to make sure that our facilities always clean and ready to produce food. And it ensures that our sources, our suppliers, are approved suppliers, qualified, and that, again, all of our practices throughout the supply chain, throughout our facilities. We do a lot of internal auditing, sanitation, environmental monitoring, especially on a product that's so low risk. It's still important for us to show that even though it's a safe and low risk product, we still want to make sure that our facilities are always maintained, cleaned, and that we have all those systems and we're documenting all the things that we're doing. We do a lot of great things, and we document that we're doing because we're proud of it.
Yeah.
I like to remind ourselves that we pay for this extra certification. We actually do this to ourselves. You know, it's a little stressful sometimes to make sure that we're always doing the things right. And we've got a really strong team that helps ensure from production to maintenance to supply chain to purchasing, warehousing, even distribution, you know, with our fleet of trucks, and make sure that those drivers are trained to lock the trailers and keep them always safe, especially since we're hauling that sweet nectar.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love it. Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks. So, GloryBee has become a TrueSource certified member. Can you tell us a little bit about TrueSource and why it just rounds out, you know, and puts a stamp on, you know, what we care about in terms of honey and what it really means, what it represents, the certification.
Yeah, so not only is honey a concern for food fraud, but I remember when I first started a few years after I was here, there was this big story out of Seattle about honey laundering. I just thought this was so fascinating because I think Sopranos was also a show at the time, and I was just like, how how is this laundering, this mob mentality in the honey industry? It's honey, right? That's so weird. But yeah, unfortunately, there was some practices happening, a few years ago where um, you know, shipments were being transshipped from one country to another because of the lower quality of honey coming out of some areas. So they were transshipping them to other countries, and it's a form of fraud, right? So TrueSource was created to, you know, monitor that known risk and that, you know, bad practice. Um, Ironically, we were doing all of the things before TrueSource even became a thing. Before it was a certification, we were doing all of the testing. We were ensuring that we knew where our honey was coming from. We were visiting those suppliers. So TrueSource is it's another third-party verification that you're doing what you say you will do, right? So they verify that the sources where we're buying our honey from are the actual source where that honey was produced. There are audits in those, or auditors in those regions that verify, especially if it's from a higher risk country, they'll their boots on the ground watching those containers get loaded. And there's some additional testing, again, that we've always been doing, but it's now a requirement to do some you know, look at the pollen. Does that pollen represent that region that you know that honey's coming from? Again, the adulteration testing. Just a third-party verification to say that yes, you're doing what you say you're doing, and your claims are true and honest. And it's another one of those certifications that we get to pay for, and we get audited on an annual basis. Our suppliers get audited, even our domestic beekeepers and partners here in the U.S. The one thing that I'm proud about, as far as, you know, being with TrueSource and with GloryBee, is that we will help our domestic beekeepers get their TrueSource memberships and really encourage their registration with TrueSource and with their, you know, their local state beekeeping associations, just so that they can gain that knowledge, and understanding of best practices, and for packing and extracting honey.
Oh, that's great. So,
Yeah.
man, okay. So back to this idea of the bee's knees. The bees are kind of the best. We've talked about, keeping the honey in the best state. And so, you know, we're striving for that here at GloryBee. I know. I mean, you strive for that. Your team strives for that. The whole hive is striving to just be the best. And yet challenges come our way. So, is there a challenge you can think of that we've had to overcome that just represents the fact that we're continuing to strive to be the best in honey and provide the best in honey, like the
Yeah.
bees do?
I'm really proud of the work that was done, before I got here, and that we continue to do. We're constantly doing this continuous improvement, with our partners and with each other, and coming up with different ways to do all of this better. I would say the biggest challenge would just the support that the domestic beekeepers need, and there's just not the resources for the domestic beekeepers to really get that training, whether it's from the Department of Ag or their state beekeeping association. As far as the hard thing about beekeepers, especially domestically, is their main business is pollinating. And so this idea of GMPs when they're extracting the honey and harvesting and packing, that's not always, at the forefront of their mind, because their goal is to get to the next, crop or farm, for the pollination. And so a lot of the beekeepers will, share, extracting equipment or share a packing house, and just to be able to get them to understand the importance of GMPs, the importance of, containing containers, trying to explain to a beekeeper that this drum that you're putting the honey in is food contact packaging. The FDA recognizes it as food, and they just think, no, that's just a metal drum. And so there's, I think just, to be able to give these domestic beekeepers a little bit more training and support in those areas around food safety, I think is probably one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've done some partnership with Oregon State to help with some education around for domestic beekeepers, and I think it's Oregon State has a commercial beekeeping program, and you've been a part of that at one point, right?
Yeah, I think our partnership with the Save the Bee, and all the work that we do there with the Bee Lab at OSU, we were given the opportunity to do, for several years, do some training directly with the beekeepers, teach them about FSMA and the importance of food safety. We were actually able to take a large group of Oregon State beekeepers to a honey house where the hives were being extracted, and walk through that facility and go over just basic GMPs, pest control, which sounds odd when you're talking about beekeeping, but sanitation, foreign material control. And so there's just a lot of those terms that they're just not familiar with. I mean, they're farmers, they're pollinators, and so that's their business. So it was a great experience, and they're so open. One of the things that I most enjoyed about that, some of those training sessions, is to see the younger generation get excited and passionate about beekeeping. And so that was a lot of fun to see, the younger generation out there and really excited about beekeeping in general, but also the food safety side of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, it sounds
Yeah.
like we're making progress, and it's great to be able to partner and provide that education. So I've got a question for you, back to honey. What's the best product or food you've ever had made with honey? What is that? What for you do you just love? Or is there a go-to? So it could be the
Um,
best, or it could just be your go-to. I love this product
yeah.
with honey.
That's a good one, Alan. That's a good one. I love food. So, and I love honey, for sure.
Well, you're at the right
But
place. You're at the right
yeah,
place
yeah,
then.
and I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I have access to a lot of honey, so you could bet that it's in a lot of our meals and our dinners and our drinks. Um, but I would say it's a tie. So honey is really unique in that it's a great browning agent. So um, I use it as a marinade on pork chops, and you just get this beautiful,
Ooh.
on meat, you just get this
Mm.
beautiful Maillard reaction, and it makes just a great crust on that, on that meat. And then it just adds to the tenderness from the acidity of the honey, and it's it makes for the best pork chops.
Okay.
But I will
When's
say
dinner? When's
the
dinner? No, I'm
I
just
know,
joking.
I know. My other favorite one is specifically a monofloral honey, our orange blossom honey. It's one of my favorite. I mean, they're all my favorites. Let's be real, but we get our orange blossom honey out of California. I'm originally from California, so I might be a little biased there. But I make a good chicken stir fry with the
Mm.
orange blossom honey, and it just brings out the sweetness and the citrus notes, and just adding it with all the vegetables and the meat, and it just makes for a great stir fry. So I would say those are my two go-tos.
Okay, fantastic. I love it. Well, Julie, it's been just fantastic to have you on the Straight from the Hive channel podcast today. And um, you're just a joy to talk to. And it's fun to just riff on honey and all the things that you've seen, tasted, accomplished. And it's just great to have you part of the Hive and to just hear about all the great work that we've been doing and we're going to continue to do because the bees do it. So we got to just follow their lead. So
Right?
uh, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
All right, signing off, everybody. See you
Bye.
next time on Straight from the Hive.